Pray tell, good sir, please explain to me why you believe in this Christianity.
I believe in Christianity for two reasons. The first reason I believe in Christianity is because I find it logically probable, and the second reason is because I find it beautiful.
Why do you find it logically probable?
When I was younger, before I was a Christian, I never really considered Christianity. I always believed that Christianity was something that people believed because it made them feel good. I didn't think that they had any rational reason for their beliefs. It was simply a matter of faith. Now, faith is essential to Christianity, but just because faith is important to Christianity doesn't mean that it isn't logically probable. Imagine you're going to step into a boat and sail across the ocean. You have to believe that that boat is going to get you to your destination. You can't control the variables, but you are certainly going to believe that the boat is strong before you have the faith to sail in that boat across the ocean. It is the same way with Christianity. We can look from the outside and see that it is strong before we step into it, but we must eventually take that step of faith. The first reason I believe Christianity is probable is because of the universe. The way it operates, the way that it moves, appears to be rationally ordered. If we look at the conditions for life, they are so incredibly improbable that if one small factor in anything that has come to be was any different, life could not exist. If we were any closer or further away from the sun, we would not exist. If the moon was any closer or further away, we would not exist. The second reason I believe in Christianity is the moral argument. Everybody has a standard of values in how they live, and every culture and every society holds similar values. Now, on the surface, it may not seem that way. For example, some cannibal tribes eat people, which to our culture we find rather shocking. But one thing about these tribes is that they don't eat anyone, only the outsider, who to them the moral law does not apply. They have very similar moral laws to us, but only to a specific group of people. Maybe their family, maybe the tribe, or maybe their community. Whatever society you live in, you have a certain set of rules that applies to your own society. To the Christian worldview, that group is the entire world, but all societies seem to have one very similar moral law. It seems to be that something exists outside of ourselves. It's a law that seems to exist in all cultures, and many want to follow it, but few succeed. We can't imagine this law to be an instinct. Instinct would tell us to run away from danger or gunfire, but when we know there's someone that we care about, there seems to be another instinct that calls us to go in and protect them. But there seems to be a third voice between the two that tells us that it is our duty to go into that space of danger and protect those in harm's way. We see that this isn't an instinct, it is something that reasons between the instinct. It calls us to our duty. Often the voice that calls us to our duty is promoting the internal desire that might be our weaker instinct. The stronger emotion is usually to run away from the danger. It's the still smaller voice that encourages us to stand in the face of danger. This doesn't seem to be a herd instinct that was evolved into us. It seems to be a moral calling that is external to our own selves. These arguments seem to show that it is logically possible and perhaps probable that there is a God, but they don't give us much information about who this God is. So if there is a God, and that God wanted to be known, he would have had to give us some form of revelation. We would need to see if this God has spoken into the world. Now, many people have claimed that God has spoken to them and through them, and we would need some way to record it. I would think that in all of the world's history, if anyone would have spoken from God, it would have been this figure named Jesus. In almost every religion that exists, whether it's Islam, Hinduism, or Buddhism, and of course Christianity, they all agree that Jesus was a prophet or a good teacher, and he knew something about God. So if we are going to look at anyone, we should probably start by looking at Jesus. But how can we see what he had to say? We can't simply go and interview him. We would have to look at the historical accounts of him that exist. Whenever you look at the historical accounts, you want to start with the oldest accounts. The oldest accounts of Jesus are known as the New Testament. Now, the earliest Christian writings are going to be Paul, and there are 4 bioses, which are the type of biography that Plutarch would have written. They tell the life story about Jesus from the perspective of 4 different authors. Those are what we call the Gospels in the Christian world. So I feel that I've laid down the existence of God as probable, and that in some sense, the religion to beat would be Christianity because of its monopoly on the early sources about Jesus. But to really understand this Jesus, you would have to look at who he was and what he did. It is essential that you believe that Jesus is beautiful. If you don't believe that he is beautiful, then it's foolish to become a Christian. To look from an objective standpoint, the New Testament is one of the most profound literary classics of world history, and certainly contends for one of the finest writings ever put to paper. The Sermon on the Mount is one of the greatest ethical writings ever penned, and the idea of a God taking on the ultimate sacrifice for the world for the sake of love is one of the most profound, beautiful ideas in existence. And the idea that a small, persecuted, impoverished Jewish sect would have written all of this seems incredibly unlikely, unless they were guided by the divine providence. And it's clear that these great writings were rooted in this Jesus figure. Another interesting thing that we see is that other Christian and early Gnostic groups of that time also were writing, and that their writings were of a substantially lower quality. This shows the uniqueness of the New Testament. It is incredibly amazing that we find such an incredible depth in the early Christian writings that we don't see even in the writings of the most learned scholars throughout history. And I don't think this is just religious bias. There are many, even atheists, who hold that the New Testament is the greatest writing in human history.
Please, sir, explain to me, why should this matter to me?
Why, thank you. I believe that in some sense, whether we think about it or not, that in some way we know that there is something fundamentally broken or wrong with this world. That is why when you go to the bookstore, half of the books are on self-improvement. It is because fundamentally we know that deep down there is something wrong, and we need an answer to it. Often we see the most wealthy and successful people are still lost. They might have everything they could ever need or want, but they are often the most depressed. They have obtained everything that this world could provide, everything they could desire, yet it seems that they have an eternal craving for something that cannot be obtained in this world. We have a need for something that is external to us. Perhaps you don't feel that way now, but there will be a time, or perhaps in the past you've had a time where you felt that there's something missing, something outside of yourself that you need, that nothing in this world can satisfy. When you feel that feeling, I want you to consider picking up the Gospels and reading them for yourself. See if that might be the answer to your longing. And if you're feeling brave, ask God that He would show Himself to you, that He would speak to you, and then listen.